Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is Jonas Reports for the 8th of June. Well, we're continuing the move that we expected. This is, again, not about value from a standpoint of people thinking that the market is going up and therefore, there should be earnings in that. This is about the devaluation of the U.S. dollar. Something I was telling you about way back over here when the Fed began all this. This was going to be the likely result. And now we're up at 32, we're only 800 shy of 4,000, so when we get there, we're getting pretty close to the peak that we had right there in the 33 range. So we'll see how far that is. If we go back to the beginning of the year, we're getting close to the start of the year value, which is around 30 to 20-ish range. We kind of think we hit that in pre-market, didn't we? What was the high so far? No, we got pretty close, 32.11, so almost even for that marker. And that was already a high water mark with a thriving, robust economy. And now you have literally the same with 100% opposite. So what happens if things do ramp up? Will that generate even more? Most likely. But we'll have to see it. Of course, now, everyone has realized that there's no need for coronavirus social distancing and that because you've got the riots and that. And it looks like maybe the violent portion of them has turned the corner, which would mean that people might be freer or safer to go back to doing business, which that will be an important aspect to start up again. From an NQ standpoint, already taken up the peak. So there you have it. But this has been a tech-driven situation. You've seen the wealthiest tech entrepreneurs see massive increase in their wealth simply because of the necessity when everyone was confined to rely on technology-based everything. And of course, we talked about this. And this is such an irony, though, because the Eurozone is, for all intents and purposes, virtually dead. The GDP of Italy and Spain and Portugal and that, it's utterly pathetic at this particular point. The EU has just subscribed another, just under $1 trillion to try and hand out some money to various countries. But the only one buying any of this is the ECB. So at that particular point, who else is buying this stuff up? I'll give you a hint. It starts with FED, the Fed. But they're the ones who've been supporting Italian banks and European banks for some time, inflating it because you need this euro at this level, which assists the U.S. But the reality is that from a global currency reserve that everyone always talks about dethroning the dollar, there's more money moving into the dollar from that standpoint, which begs the question, why see the euro? Because you're devaluing the dollar at the same time. It's still a reserve currency of the world, and so the Fed has to counterbalance that by trying to keep the EU a little bit more afloat. It actually kind of hurts the EU when you think about it, but they don't really have much of a choice because without U.S. liquidity, they are finished. Now we're up to 40. I just kept saying, look for that march back to 50. Is there enough consumption in that to justify the price increases? No, and you just had Saudi Arabia announced the other day that they're just automatically raising the price that they charge other people for oil just because. And this is part of that general plan. Of course, I think Trump is even desirous of oil around the $50 a barrel range in that because he knows that at that level you've got a significant enough range in there that most of the Texas oil producers in that can really sustain themselves and keep things an even keel. We'll see if it gets there. It should have no trouble. I mean, we're in a fine run here and everything indicates it from a DSC standpoint there, so there's no deviation whatsoever. That puts a little bit of downside pressure on gold, even though the inflation pressures are real. They have not materialized yet. This is something we've talked about, and until they begin to show themselves, and we will see that because I think probably by the time you get oil to 43 or 44, you're going to start seeing some more interest in gold quickly, very quickly. So this was just some serious fun. Friday, it started out the pre-market, again, the pre-market leading the action. But in this case, anyone who had been lagging, who has not caught on to the idea of what's been going on with the market, started to get a clue and realized, oh, we better start getting in. And you can just see this is just straight up nonsense here. So we got this huge series of positive extremes. This is kind of your warning sign to start marking them. Actually, I should even do that myself, just to put them in here. They were on here, but I had to reboot my system and they did not hold. So put a line right there. Now, here's the first positive extreme, and then you ended up with a couple of yellow before you started another cycle. Is it safer to start with the one that's a little bit higher? Sure. Because it makes much more sense, because it has come off of a new cycle. So, but you would still have this initial one because it's still a valid one. That's what actually, where the algo began its work. And that becomes the key threshold point. And we want to change the color of it too, because when we see it in magenta, we know what it means. And it's just a matter of looking for it to get filled back in, which happens not all that much later. I mean, it took a little while, but still, there was some pretty decent activity. And then we started to get back to a little bit of chop action until the Sigma event taking place right there, pivot going up, and that caused a nice spark at the start of Futures Open. But it was positive extreme right off the top, so they just popped it, took out shorts that had a little peak area, and then let it drop right back down, fills everything right back in, and bases right off the bottom. And now we're on to, now that we filled everything back in, came right off the algo. But these guys are fantastic. I love them. Of course we do, because we can see what they're doing, and they do it on a regular basis for us, and they make it nice and easy. So that always is helpful when they do that. But as always, I will certainly put up anything relevant as it pops up. I think we're just going to continue to see more of these just spectacular ranges. I mean, look at even this from a pre-market standpoint, from being at 83 all the way back up to 32, after having already been above to 32.11. It's fantastic stuff. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk again later.